Afternoon, everybody. It's good to be with you. Suddenly, we've lost my picture. Okay, let's see what we can do here. Sure, what happened? Hey, Matthew, how are you? We got Matt Weatherby with us, and had some technical difficulties just a minute ago. We got slammed off, and we'll get Matt's mic working here in a minute. Big weekend. We got to see the World Cup final, was um, which as a fan, it was boring. It was There was a lot of action going on, but not any scoring, and it's too bad that the third place game between France and England couldn't have been played because on as the final, because a 6-4 final would have been a lot of fun. So we'll see how that all goes. And ratings wise, I imagine we're going to be doing pretty well on that. So good times. It was a good World Cup. Everything went really well, and hopefully we'll get an opportunity to see those ratings in the not too distant future, probably in the next couple of days. Quick update on that, and that is Telemundo has scored a huge deal for them. Uh, the Miami-based network is going to be home to the UEFA Champions League. Basically, they're going to have every match of the UEFA Championship League. That'll be streaming on Peacock as well, so it's a big deal. Uh, Over 35% of the people who watched World Cup 2026 on, uh, uh, on the on Telemundo were English speaking folks. So it was a big win for Telemundo. I've always watched Telemundo. They do a very good job. All right, let's see if we can get Matt back in here. Matthew, how you doing, buddy? You there?
Yeah, doing good. I think my reception should be a little bit better now.
Oh, good, good. Sounds good. Good to have you back. And I was just talking about the World Cup over the weekend. I think the World Cup itself is going to have a good overall rating. I think that the final, um, it didn't hit the mark. I think Spain was, obviously the better team. But I think when they got back into extra time, you thought, well, okay, well, we may see this in penalties, which is what happened in the last time when Argentina beat France in the final to win it all. So I think a lot of people thought, okay, we're going back there, deja vu all over again. But over the weekend, the Saturday game, which was the third place game between France and England, that was a 6-4 game. I think that would have been more to the likings of the American soccer fan.
Yeah, just for the casual, enjoyer, I think a lot of Americans probably started watching a little bit more soccer with the World Cup being over here.
Mhm.
And for just for your casual sports enjoyer, I think that
Mhm.
you're probably correct. The Saturday game was a little bit more appealing. Lots of balls in the back of the net
Mhm.
compared to Sunday, where you really need to understand soccer and I think appreciate soccer to have gotten the full enjoyment out of that game. I think it was impressive, honestly, that Argentina was able to hold Spain scoreless for as long as they did, and I was really impressed with their efforts at the end and some of the looks they were able to get with a chance to tie it up. But ultimately, being with the red card, being down a
Mhm.
man, with the stats already so heavily favoring Spain, and really Spain having a really just a good feel of control throughout the entire game. It would have been a really, really impressive feat if Argentina were to have been able to
To pull
equalize
it
there in the
off.
second half and ultimately send it to penalties.
Yeah, I think that you're right. It kind of felt in many ways like a rope-a-dope situation, right? Where if you're Argentina, you're just taking these waves of the Spanish players. And by the way, Martinez, the goalkeeper for um, for Argentina, was just ridiculous. I mean, he anything that came close, he was able to get a finger on it or something to get it out of the way. So it could have Spain could have been up 2-0, 3-0 easy, had he not been playing out, totally insane. So that was pretty cool. As far as the Messi factor, he came in and excuse me, when I say he came in, he came into the picture toward the end where he was serving the balls perfectly up there, and there were like two or three shots that I thought one of them was going to go in, and and tie it back up again. But they couldn't get it in, and so at the end of the day, Spain Spain deserved it. They were the European champions, and they did their best. Now, one of the things that, and we weren't gonna we're gonna move to SEC Media Day here in a minute, but the one of the things I guess I should say that bothered me this morning was listening to sports talk radio and how absolutely insanely stupid some of these, you know, uh, how can I say it? Um, these people who do do uh, the sports talk radio shows. I mean, they were talking about yesterday being, oh, it was boring. Okay, fine, it was boring. I'm not lying. It was boring. However, didn't mean that nothing. There wasn't any excitement. The other thing that they said was that Lionel Messi had to be one of the most overrated soccer players in history. And I'm thinking, please God, just put me out of my misery and have these guys, lose their connection or something. I mean, it's just it drives me crazy how stupid that some of these sports talk radio guys are when it comes to anything that isn't football, baseball, or basketball.
Yeah, it's something that you really almost had to expect with the World Cup
It's
being in
lazy,
America.
is what it is. It's
It,
lazy.
it is lazy because it does take a very, you know, I mean I have don't watch soccer that much, but I still have the baseline understanding and knowledge that in order for Messi to be a factor in the game and really play
Mhm.
any, part in that game, Argentina has to control the ball at some point, and they were not
Sure.
able to ever gain control and
Right.
really put together any offensive runs throughout the
Mhm.
majority. I mean, throughout the first probably 105 minutes of that game.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
The thing
it's just
okay. Go ahead, I'm
yeah,
sorry.
it's just something that, and there is a certain aspect of this of what we do in media where clicks are important, right? And
Mhm.
everything that we do, you want people to pay attention. You want things to get clicks. What's the best way to get a click is to have just an asinine take, if we're being honest.
Right.
And so that I would be nothing short of shocked if they weren't at a probably just fishing for attention there.
Uh, I would I would normally agree with you, but these guys have been, off this topic for a while. The thing that fascinates me, Matt, is that, and why I say sports talk radio um, hosts are normally just plain lazy, is because they don't want to expand the audience at all. They
Hmm.
don't want to try to do it. I mean, I find this all the time. You know, you and I live in I don't anymore, but you and I live in the South where, stock car racing, NASCAR is
Hmm.
um, these guys don't care about NASCAR. These guys don't care about, tennis. They don't care about, um, to an extent, golf. I mean, there's a little bit of golf. They were making fun this morning of the Open Championship, and how it looked like they were playing in a cow pasture. And I'm thinking, just shut up. If you don't know something about anything, and look, I don't know everything about everything either, but
Yeah.
you know, I do want to know. This is something that when I say it, people just go off their freaking minds. And when you say that this that the Super Bowl worldwide is outrated by the World Cricket Championships, they want to go. You know, you want to win a bar bet. That's an easy one. You'll
Yeah.
cash $10 on that anytime. And they're going like, "Oh, that's impossible." It's like, no, it's not impossible. I mean, you've got India, Pakistan, a lot of Europe, and a lot of Southeast Asia are all cricket fans. So, you know, I've actually taken to, to at least have a basic understanding. You talked about basic understanding. That's all anybody wants, right? Just,
Hmm.
and if you want to open the phone lines up and try desperately to do a job of actually um, getting to a point where you can uh, have a baseline understanding of some of these sports, so that when you bring on guests, you don't embarrass yourself, but you bring
Yeah.
on guests to talk about it, because what you're doing is you're keeping the same audience that you have. You're not expanding that audience at all. You're just
Yeah.
keeping, and that keeping it's not going to do you any good.
Yeah. And I mean, I can say, like, I wasn't getting up at the butt crack of dawn to watch
Mm,
the Open.
sure,
You know, luckily I get up pretty early anyways throughout the week, so
sure.
I was catching a good bit of it. But if I mean, you didn't have to watch. To be honest, if you just scrolled social media, you didn't have to watch any of
Right.
the Open Championship to find a laundry list worth of headlines out of this major and out of this
Mhm.
golf tournament this week. Other than, it looked like they were playing in a cow pasture. That is the definition of lazy, because you have everything from the Bryson situation to
Right.
Rory then publicly saying that he's not fond of Bryson.
Right.
And I mean, you've got a billion commercials coming out of NBC and Peacock, and there's a lot of criticism regarding their coverage and the way
Hmm.
they handled that final round. You've got a 39-year-old Ryan Fox completing the biggest comeback in major championship history
Right.
over the last 2 days. And all in all, you've got a really like interesting golf course that maybe you didn't get the right color palette because you were watching it on NBC and not on the world feed,
Hmm.
and it did look like a little bit like a cow pasture, but it played a fun style of golf and it gave challenges. And going back to Ryan Fox, and honestly, some of the just seemingly Houdini acts, because he got a couple of
Hmm.
really bad breaks and some bunkers in his back nine, and it just didn't matter. He battled through it and he played exceptionally well
Hmm.
with a winning birdie on the final hole, which was one of the toughest all week. Like,
Right.
it's again, wasn't able to sit down and just watch the coverage all the way through,
Mhm.
but still, I can sit there and rip off that with the limited amounts that I was able to watch.
Mhm. Um, I think that, to put a button on this, uh, I did the feed that we all got for the Open was basically the Sky Golf feed, which is the home broadcaster for for the British Open, and the Sky feed was fine. I mean, I watched it on Sky in England, um, and it was fine. It's the announcers, it's NBC's constant. We got to promote everything concept. Um, I really don't know, or don't care to know, I should say, about another show that's going to be on 2 weeks from now. I understand that's you got to pay the bills. I get that, 100%. I mean, that was my job for a long time, paying the bills. So I
Hmm.
understand that. I think, and Dan Hicks usually does an outstanding job. Um, I just think that there was a lot of stuff there that they missed, and it wasn't a clear, concise CBS type broadcast.
Yeah, and there's some of the criticism, and the criticism doesn't directly relate to the people that were on the
No.
broadcast covering it,
Hmm.
but it had to do with anything from boiling it down to the the coloring of the golf course looked better on the
Hmm.
world feed versus the one that NBC had. And
Right.
then you look at NBC and their commercial breaks. They had 4 and 33 minutes during that final stretch of holes.
Right.
It's at that point you're starting to get away from it. You go back and they had mentioned Scotty Scheffler, and he took a controversial drop on the 17th hole that
Right.
ultimately led to him making a birdie, and they mentioned it and then they didn't really revisit it. They just kind of left it. And that was another misstep. Is it And I think you go back and you look at the coverage of the US Open as well.
Hmm.
And it is hard to not go back and play revisionist history when you go back to Augusta this year.
Hmm.
And Kevin Kisner was very critical of CBS and their coverage of the Masters. I
Hmm.
think the criticism was well deserved. They need to have some hand up accountability, NBC and the people that are a part of that production, and say, hey, we missed the mark, because they missed the mark in back to back major championships that they were covering in both the U.S. Open and the Open.
Yeah. Um, and the fact that, and Bryson's Bryson's uh, mistake, we'll call it that, penalty, a two-stroke penalty, cost him over $250,000.
Yeah, that was a situation where and you can people, I've seen people get on Rory, and they feel like what he said about Bryson being, I think he called it attention seeking,
Yeah.
or it was performative, and people have called Rory hypocritical for that. And regardless of your thoughts on Rory, what Rory said, the words that came out of Rory's mouth, are
Hmm.
just objectively true. They really are.
Hmm.
And if you didn't believe them, his actions on hole number 18 the following day really
Hmm.
kind of solidified that, because he hit it into the fescue on 18 as well.
Hmm.
And he called over a rules official and was very demonstrative about, like he held his hands out,
Hmm.
showing or emphasizing that he was not patting down any grass.
Hmm.
And so it does feel performative, and it feels like it's a put on act, but it at the same time, he gets numbers, and that does numbers. And whether you agree with the ruling or not, I think the only reason that his peers would be unhappy, or the fact that they didn't get their tee times till about 11 p.m. over there.
Right. It's funny because, again, watching it on Sky Golf, the announcers were sympathetic to Bryson.
Hmm.
Because they know what the course is, right? And they said, where he hit the ball, and you saw him I don't want to say stamp, because he didn't do that. He just moved. He just kind of like he was straddling something. You know how you get in
Yeah.
tall grass and now rookie. And so the guy goes, look, how exactly are you supposed to step into a shot if if you can't if the grass is almost up to your knees? He goes, you're going to have to step on it. He goes, now, did the
Mhm.
ball move, or did he move it with, way he did it, or make a lie? Because he probably took a impossible lie and made it into a worse lie, right? It's like,
Hmm.
it's a bad lie, but guess what? It's going to get worse. Um, so I mean, at least they had a little bit of, they weren't playing favorites, right? They were just saying, okay,
Yeah.
look. And then they said, well, if he gets a penalty, he gets a penalty. I mean, he goes, one of the things, and this is the thing that I think was probably the most, to me, most impressive way of looking at it was, look, golf is all about self, self ruling
Hmm.
and taking responsibility for things. And they said, Bryson can make his case. Um, but he says at the end of the day, he'll either accept or he won't accept the rules. And he goes, and he came out. And Bryson said, literally, the moment he came out, they had him because, they were standing outside the room. And
Hmm.
when he came out, he says, look, I don't necessarily agree with it. But he said, you know what? At the end of the day, the rules are the rules.
Yeah.
And he said,
And
I guess, they said, so what are you going to do next time? He goes, hopefully not hit it in the same place.
yeah.
Um, so I mean, he kind of, he deflected with humor, which is about, it's a Bryson deal. He deflected with humor an opportunity that could have been much more awkward than it was, and made it very, entertaining.
Yeah. I think where the where I drew issue wasn't it, you know, be upset with the penalty. I
Sure.
absolutely why understand why he can be upset with the penalty. It didn't look like it was anything really intentional,
Hmm.
but at the same point in time, it was the actions afterwards were really what kind of
Hmm.
bothered me. Because it really felt like you gave a penalty to a 12-year-old. Like, that's what it
Hmm.
felt like he was acting like. Not a 32-year-old. It felt like there was a 12-year-old out there on the driving range, and he was very mopey and I just didn't get it from a two-time major champion and a guy
Hmm.
who, even with a two-shot penalty, was only sitting 3 shots off the lead going into the weekend.
Hmm.
And I was of the opinion that if you feel that wronged by the RNA, the easiest way to really avenge that, or get back at
Hmm.
them, is say, all right, fine, assess that two-shot penalty. I'm going to make you hand me the trophy on Sunday.
Right.
And that didn't happen. And I don't know if it was exclusively related to that scenario, but I also go back to Rory's comments, and he was talking about how it did feel a little bit disrespectful because he stayed on that driving range until it was pitch black. I think some of the
Hmm.
things that I saw said the only light came from phones and the dim
I saw
glow
that.
of launch monitor.
Right.
And it's, now you've kept volunteers, you've kept staff, you've kept
Hmm.
media. 'Cause media does need to stay and cover that. these
Sure.
these folks are now, they're now at the golf course well past 10 p.m. as well.
Right.
And it is a little bit, it's unfair to them because you're not, you can say what you want, he's not getting a lot out of hitting golf balls in the pitch black. It's just not,
Yeah.
it's not replicable for anything. You're not really learning all that much in the dark. You can, you still get the numbers off of your launch monitor, you get your swing play and stuff like that,
Right.
but it's
You
not,
can do
you're
that
not
on
getting,
an iPad back in the hotel.
yeah, you're not getting better at 10:30 at night.
The thing, and I'll finish it up with this, but the thing that I thought was interesting was, he was. They asked him about his argument with the rules people, on the course,
Hmm.
and again, this is when he was talking to Sky, and he said, "Look, I was willing to take a one shot penalty, but I'm not quite sure how what you know escalated this to a two-shot penalty." And so he said, my argument was not that I didn't, I would take the one shot. I just was concerned about why I was getting two shots. So, I'm not taking up for him. I'm just saying that he was demonstrative and argumentative about what he thought was okay, you're going to give me a penalty. I get that. But why is it two and not one?
Yeah.
And that's not an excuse to keep everybody out there till 11 o'clock at night.
No. No, it is not. And he did later go back and request his scorecard from Friday.
Right.
With request what the RNA did deny. That
Mhm.
one is also strange. I don't know why you would go back and request that again. That just feels like it's unnecessary. But it is part of his personality. It is part of his brand. This is kind of the brand that he's built, and
Mhm.
it works and it plays, and it has made him a very successful YouTube. A built a good YouTube channel, and has built him a strong following. But
Mhm.
now it is also very much split the room, and you either love Bryson DeChambeau or you hate Bryson DeChambeau, and it does not feel like there is much room in the middle at this point in time.
No, I don't think there is. And I think that, you know what, if, and I don't know him, but I know enough about him. I think that's okay with him.
Yeah, and it also people have said this, and I do think it is correct with Rory's comments, with what Bryson does,
Mhm.
is there do need to be bad guys. There always need to be
Sure.
bad guys in sports. It's not always easy being a bad guy in sports.
Mhm.
I think Wyndham Clark was very vocal about how difficult it has been because he has been a bad guy in golf
Mhm.
for the past I mainly over the past year, but it was prior to that as well. And he talked about how tough it could be, how tough it was having people rooting
Mhm.
against him on Sunday at
Mhm.
Shinnecock. I almost blanked on that there, but
Good catch.
yeah, but it ultimately was a dramatic end to major
Mhm.
season, and ultimately really with the World Cup being on Sunday, it almost feels like the end of international sports, and now my mind starts to kind of shift gears. Obviously, you still have the Tour Championship, you have the
Mhm.
President's Cup, all those things are there in golf. And soccer, I'm not sure about the schedule. I'm sure the Premier League will start up at
Yeah, the
some point
Premier
next
League
year.
usually starts up in August,
Yeah.
but the interesting thing is they're normally when teams get playing in August, um, some of they're not the actual rosters aren't totally finished, so you can have transfers that come in August, that you, in other words, your team can look so much different in September than it does in August because of the transfer window and how things work in that regard.
Yeah.
So even though you're getting it started, and I think after a World Cup situation, it takes a little longer to get your teams all set up. But yeah, they'll be coming back in the not too distant future, a couple months from now.
Yeah. It just seems like it almost seems like an endpoint for the international aspect
Yeah.
of the sports.
Hmm.
And now we'll shift back to it, at least America tends to shift back into their
Right.
sports here, mainly being football.
Right. And that leads us into Media Week has gotten underway down in Tampa, and there's storylines all over the place. Um, what are some of the things that you want to see or hear out of media days? Each coach gets a day. They get two. I'm sorry, gets a session, um, and there's going to be, you know, that's going to start tomorrow. It goes through Thursday,
Hmm.
and there's players wandering around over there, and um, I guess the news that was off, um, the news that today was Sankey's State of the Union address, um, and he was pretty. He was uncommittal about the 24. Um, you know, the 24 team playoff. He was also very, you know, coach speaky, if you will, which is not a word, but anyway, um, about the fact of them breaking away with perhaps a Big Ten and forming some sort of super league. Um, he didn't want to talk about it, but he definitely left it hanging out there.
Yeah, yeah. The breakaway, I think it was discussed as
Yeah.
that's something to absolutely you got to listen to those words
Hmm.
that come from these commissioners' mouths. They're not going to give you too much, but
No.
sometimes you can just glean a little bit. Um,
Hmm. He
but
didn't rule it
it's
out.
yeah, it is interesting on the thing that I've seen already is some of the SEC coaches or a good portion of the SEC coaches are already regretting the shift in schedule, and they are already not
You
happy
mean
about the
to the
shift in
9 games?
schedule to the 9 games plus
Yeah.
the extra P4 because there's an
Right.
extra P4 requirement that the
Yeah.
SEC put in because there are certain teams. Kentucky plays Louisville, that's an extra P4 game. Georgia plays Georgia Tech. Florida
Right.
plays Florida State. There are these
Right.
teams that have these rivalries that are out of conference and their annual rivalries. So the SEC is built in the extra P4 game. They feel like it's much different than the Big Ten. They feel like the Big Ten, along with the fact that they think that the league is different from top to bottom, which
Hmm.
you can agree or disagree with, but these are the thoughts of these guys in this conference. Is they don't have that extra P4 qualifier. So Ohio State and Michigan and Penn State and Indiana and Oregon, these guys can go out there and they can play Montana State 3 times in a row
Hmm.
and before they get into the meat of their conference schedule, which again these SEC coaches also believe to be weaker than their conference schedule overall as well.
Hmm. All right. So we got that. We got 6 new coaches. Any thoughts on who is going to benefit by most by this?
Um, I, I don't think anybody's going to benefit from the added schedule.
No,
It
no.
would be
I'm sorry. What I meant was of the 6 new coaches, who do you think? I mean, I think it's pretty obvious that Kiffin has a pretty good shot at at LSU, but there's a lot of other guys who are getting there and getting a shot, and we'll see how that works out.
yeah. I think just in terms of who's going to come away, like who will people walk away from media days being really impressed and believing in.
Hmm.
I would be shocked if John Summerall at Florida is not king amongst them. I
Hmm.
think he is very good in terms of his speaking, and I
Hmm.
think he did a really good job. I think he did a really good job at Tulane, and I overall think he
Hmm.
has the ability to
Hmm.
put Florida back together because things were
Right.
a little bit broken there in terms of their recruiting was doing good, but the results on the field were two very different things.
Right.
And when you're able to kind of pair those two together and you do have the coaching pedigree that he has, I think that people are going to come away, thrilled with him. In terms of who's truly going to be, the most successful, I think Kiffin aside, because Kiffin
Mhm.
aside, that's he feels like a special circumstance because of one, what he's proven he can do, and
Right.
two, nobody else is getting bankrolled the same way that his roster got bankrolled in the offseason.
Hmm.
It, you know, Florida has money, Auburn has money. They added some good pieces, and their rosters got better in the offseason. It still has nothing on what Lane Kiffin was able to go in and spend
Right.
at LSU, and in fairness, it has nothing on compared to what Texas was able to go out and spend. I mean,
Hmm.
they added 2 running backs that were two of the best in the country last year. They added Cam Coleman, who
Hmm.
was, I feel like it was pretty hands down. He was the best player available in the transfer portal.
Hmm.
Definitely the best skill position player available in the transfer portal. And then they'll have another year of, Wingo and Arch Manning. Their offense and their skill positions are going to be loaded. But in terms of success, I am curious about Auburn because I like Golish and he is back working with the same guy that he had success at USF with last year in Byron Brown. And there is something about like I when an Auburn team is able to win and
Mhm.
win early and kind of build some momentum.
Mhm.
Weird things happen in that building. It doesn't matter who the head coach
Right.
is. Weird things happen in Jordan Hare Stadium, and so you can never count out an Auburn team that maybe has, maybe they start off the season 4 or 5-0,
Mhm.
and maybe that dark Jordan Hare magic starts working itself towards the end of the season, and they pull off a couple that maybe you think they shouldn't.
Here's my concern. I mean, I like, as you know, Alex Golish from USF. I didn't like the way he left, but sometimes things get to be messy, and you can't necessarily blame the person on that because
Mm-hmm.
you don't know all the things that were on, behind all that.
Yeah.
The concern I have for him is Byron Brown. Uh, Byron can beat you with his legs. He can't beat you with his arm. He can beat American teams with his arm, but the American is not the SEC. And I think that's going to be very. I'm going to watch that closely because you get behind, and there's a very good chance Auburn will be behind in some of these games. Uh, can Byron Brown beat you if they know they can take the run off of away from him? If they can
Mm-hmm.
spy him, you know. And Byron's a pretty good sized guy, so he's not like Cam. He's almost Cam Newton size, but not quite. He's not Cam Newton built from a standpoint of physical attributes in that regard. But he can throw the ball deep, but his accuracy in passes that aren't deep is not necessarily. He had a lot of picks that should have. He should not have thrown the ball. He should have just chucked it, into the cheerleaders, and so I mean, it's not like Golish doesn't know the SEC. He was the offensive coordinator at Tennessee for years, so that part I get. But I'm curious for Alex and Byram because maybe, just maybe, um, Byron's not the guy, or it's gonna take a learning curve. I guess would be better if I'm trying to be fair. It's gonna take a learning curve, not necessarily for Golish, but definitely for Byron.
Yeah, and the biggest thing is I've seen and I've gone and watched videos of Byron Brown, throughout their practices,
Yeah.
and he has a very I strange or uncomfortable. I think would be the two ways that I would describe his throwing motion.
Yeah.
It doesn't look the same as you would expect your star quarterback to look throwing the football. It
Mhm.
it doesn't look easy. It doesn't look effortless. But
Right.
in the grand scheme of things, if he's able to make it work, then he's able to make it work. But those short passes and Auburn offense that now they're missing. I know they went and they added players out of the portal as well,
Mhm.
but they lost Eric Singleton. That's a very real loss. They lost Cam Coleman. Those were their two top options at wide
Mhm.
receiver, and you can dip into the transfer portal and you can bring in new guys. Those are two very different receivers compared to what you're going to find on the open market.
Right. Well, he also brought in some of his guys from South Florida wide receivers. All that means to me is okay. They know Golish's system, but this entire ecosystem that he built down in Tampa and is now moving to Auburn. I don't know. I guess, and I'm not. I don't want to be sounding disrespectful to the American, right? It's not.
Mm-hmm.
That would be unfair. But I don't think anybody who knows anything about college football is going to be able to say, "Oh yeah, if you're successful in American, you're going to be successful in the SEC."
Yeah, if
And
he had,
and
I mean,
so
if
it's
he had just
yeah,
brought the USF team and put them in Auburn jerseys, like it
right,
doesn't change the overall. They were a talented football team. They were a good
yeah,
football team, but they didn't go undefeated in the American. They didn't make the
no,
college football playoff as the G5 representative.
hmm,
All those things are true in a season where I think they could have, and I think they had the talent to.
yeah, they did,
And so if you're trying to take and supplement and replace an Eric Singleton or a Cam Coleman with guys that you had at USF, I'm not saying that you
right.
can't be successful, but your odds of success decrease significantly.
Well, I think you're right. And the other thing I was saying about that is, you know, it, all right, I'm not, again, these kids are good kids. Okay. I don't want to make it sound like I'm harping on them just because you left, because I'm not. Brian Hartline's a good guy. And in this, in the world of football these days, you know, a coach goes, another coach comes in. That doesn't mean you're going to lose. It just means it's going to be a different group of people.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I'm just saying my concern for Byram and for these wide receivers is the learning curve it's going to take and the time it's going to take to figure out that these guys in the SEC are faster, bigger, and smarter than the competition you played in the American.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. There is a learning curve. It's not dissimilar to that of the NFL. Like
Mm-hmm.
there's a jump that you have to make when you go from playing, it, G was it G6 now football,
Yeah.
to not just P4 football, but the SEC or the Big Ten. Those. I feel like there's very much three tiers of football: the G6, the
Mm-hmm.
ACC, and the Big 12, and then the SEC and the Big Ten.
Sure.
And so when you make that jump to what is the highest tier of football,
Mm-hmm.
there of college football, there's a learning curve. It's not the same as the NFL. I'm not saying it's the same, but there's a learning gap that occurs, and it occurs because it is a little bit of a different sport,
Mm-hmm.
and it takes some time to adjust to the speed and the way things go throughout what is it, I think where people get mixed up is they'll see a G6 team knock off a good a good P4 opponent. They're like, see,
Mm-hmm.
like the gap's not that big. The gap's not that big. You are correct in a one game sample size.
Right.
You can put together a strong 60 minutes, but you got to put together a strong 60 minutes, and then the next week you got to go out and you got to put a strong 60 minutes against a similar type opponent. It's not one game that you found a way to get it done in a vacuum. It's
Right.
now this is a team that we're playing week in and week out, and this the same kind of size, speed, and physicality week in and week out.
Well, to your point, in the G6 situation, right? It's you get them, you play. The problem is not that G6 can't compete. Okay, it's that G6 doesn't have the depth.
Mm-hmm.
They have 12 players on your squad that all could play in in an SEC environment or a Big Ten environment, but it's the other 51 players that they've got that you don't.
Yeah, yeah. There is a more complete aspect to it because even with the transfer portal and the transfer portal and NIL have leveled off the depth of some teams in terms of what they have, sitting at second and third string, but still,
Right.
Georgia, Alabama, Ohio State are going to have better second and third strings than most of the teams in the Big 12 or the ACC. Still, like
Let alone the P6.
yeah, that's the gap that you're still working with
Mhm.
of these upper echelon teams. So it's leveled off some, but these guys they still have the ability to go a couple deep, and they're a lot fresher than you're going to be in the fourth corner of a game, in the South where it's 90 degrees and humid.
Right. Um, okay, I've got one team that I'm interested in the SEC, and want your take on it. Um, what happens to Vanderbilt? Are they going
I
to continue to? Are they going to find a place where they are? You know, I'm not going to say the upper echelon, but the middle of the pack, which is not where they've been for many years, but now they seem to be getting their footing, and things are starting to roll in that direction. But I mean, they lost a lot, and I'm curious as to just where Vanderbilt's going to be this year.
I don't think it's going to be anything close to what it was last year. I think you
Well, they
almost
don't
kind of
have a
felt it.
quarterback. That would definitely hurt.
Yeah, they it felt like they were able to kind of build and put together something over a 2-year run with Diego
Right.
Pavia, and he brought something to that locker room. And
Mhm.
it's not like they're replacing him with a nobody. They're replacing him with the guy that was the number one, high school quarterback coming coming out in Jared
Mhm.
Curtis. But you're asking, not only are you asking Jared Curtis to come in and be able to play not a similar style, but you need him to have production similar to that of Diego Pavia. But what Diego Pavia was able to do, you like him outside the locker room,
Right.
you don't like him off field, whatever. I don't think I think it's an undeniable fact that the way what he did in Vanderbilt's locker room
Right.
had a significant impact on what they were able to do on the field.
He gave him a swagger.
Yeah, exactly. And so you have to replace that as well. And it's not just Diego Pavia. They lost other very talented skill players, throughout the offseason as well. And it's just asking a lot to replace for a
Mhm.
team that has not recruited that well out of high school. And they don't just kill it in the transfer portal. They've gotten better out of high school, and they've gotten
Mhm.
better because of what Diego Pavia did there. But you're asking Clark Lee to kind of replicate what was a magical season in which they did get some bounce of ball luck to get where they were. And it's just hard. It's hard to bank on that again. I would expect them to have a little bit more of a return to reality, maybe somewhere in that 6-6, 7-5 range at the end of the year.
One of the I don't know if you heard it, saw it, or read it, but um, prior to going down to Tampa, uh, there was a radio station in New Orleans who did an interview with Kiffin
Oh
about
boy.
this season, right? And they started talking about. They got away from the SEC. They started talking about national championships and players and schools that are out there that are ranked highly and that whole routine. And so, for some reason, known only to Lane, when they asked him about, well, what about Miami? He said, and he laughed. He just said, why would anybody be concerned about Miami? Because they're a one-shot wonder. Um,
That's
and so obviously, um, a radio station in Miami picked this up, calls Cristobal, and said, what do you think about Kiffin saying this?" He goes, "If I paid attention to Lane Kiffin ever," he goes, "I would never get anything done." He goes, "You know what?" He said, "I don't care if he likes us, thinks that we're going to be there or not." He goes, "When we show up and they're on the other side of the field, then he'll have an idea of whether Miami deserves to be, where we are."
hmm And this is also, I think it's important to note, and there's a chance because, I mean, heck, they all interchanged, but I'm 98% sure that this is also a guy that Lane Kiffin has shared a locker room with. Like, he was on staff at Alabama at the same time. He
Oh
was
yeah,
the
yeah, yeah.
offensive
He knows
line coach.
Mario.
Yeah.
Yeah, these are
So
not guys that don't know each other.
there is that. And it's not that I think a one-hit wonder would not be the way that I describe Miami.
Mm-mm.
What I would do in looking at Miami going into this season is understand that they lost Akeem Mesidor, Ruben Bain,
Mhm.
Francis Mauigoa, and Inez Cooper Jr. Like those were
Mhm.
those were cornerstones on both lines.
Sure.
They
Mhm.
and outside of that, they had some other players that they were missing as well,
Right.
or that they lost as well on the lines of scrimmage. And the lines of scrimmage are really hard to like just replace year in and
Mhm.
year out and have these monsters, just kind of cycle through. And it
Mhm.
is made harder by the transfer portal and not having some of these guys on
Right.
campus for, 2-3 years coming in to where they can just, step in and replace. So
Right.
I think it is going to be difficult to replace the level of physicality that they were able to create along both lines of scrimmage last
Mhm.
year, which was nothing short of crucial for the success that they had in making it to the
Sure.
national championship last year. But on the flip side of that, I think they got better at quarterback. I really do. I think Darian Mensah is going to be a better option than Carson Beck was. He played well throughout the final stretch in the playoffs last year. I think in terms of a consistency and what he'll be able to offer you through the full schedule, Darian Mensah is going to be better. You have another year of Malachi Tony. Like, you have a really
Mm-hmm.
good secondary, and you brought a good bit of guys back there,
Mm-hmm.
poison in the back end. So they still have talent, except this time their talent is going to lie more in their skill position groups on both
Right.
sides of the football as opposed to the lines of scrimmage like they had been last year.
Yeah, I thought that the shot across the bow was kind of a funny thing that
It's expected though. It's Lane Kiffin, and you put a microphone in front of his face. He's got to say something that's going to get people's attention.
uh and it, like you said, they shared locker room with each other for years. I don't know why he chose that guy to pick a fight with, um, because Mario's not going to back down at all from Lane. Um,
No,
that they're two totally different personalities.
and I guess he just didn't want to take shots across the aisle. He might have to play Kirby. He might have to play Stark. I can't remember if Texas is on LSU's schedule, but I know that they're two. Those are teams that you might have to meet in the SEC championship, and he doesn't like to throw shots at those guys. I think unless they're playing that week.
Well, they're better than he is, so I think that's probably the reason he doesn't want to do it. It's all great to have, you know, teams on paper, but that paper doesn't do you any good until you get on the field.
No,
Um, I personally, and this is just my personal feeling, even though I do like John in Gainesville. I think that was a good get. Um,
mm-hmm.
I think Georgia and Texas it's gonna be hard to beat those teams.
Well, based on the poll that came out, the entrance poll that came out,
Right.
is the media it's Texas and it's everybody else in the SEC supposedly.
I wouldn't go
Um,
that far, but
yeah, well, and again, you understand why. Is you look at the transfer portal additions, you look at who they were able to keep. It's
right.
understandable that Texas is once again at the top of the SEC standings in terms of who's going to win the conference.
Hmm.
But in fairness, they've been they've been voted number one for all 3 years that they've been in the league. I believe I could be wrong on that.
No,
I
you're right.
believe
They were.
they've been voted as the preseason winner at all three media
Hmm.
days thus far. So far, they're 0 for 2, and Kirby Smart has two more SEC championship trophies sitting in his locker room.
Right.
Um, but it's really hard because they did add a lot of really good pieces, and Arch Manning started to look a lot more comfortable in the second half of last season. So you can understand where people are believing that they can put it together. But Georgia returns a lot of their starters on both sides of
Hmm.
the football. When you look at the overall age of their roster, it's a little bit lower because their depth per se is
Hmm.
going to be younger guys that they're going to rely on to play important minutes in these games later in the year, especially. And then you look at LSU and the top line talent that they were able to bring in. There are really talented football teams.
Hmm.
Alabama, they for all the I almost think that people would just kind of expect Alabama to drop off a little bit after the way that they finished last season. I
Hmm.
know, obviously they went into Norman and they won their playoff game, but the image that is going to remain in everybody's brains is that of the Rose Bowl, and really the way they looked in that Rose Bowl, how defeated they seemed in that Rose Bowl, and then you
Hmm.
have some of the key departures that they had. But Keelan Russell is probably going to get the starting quarterback job there,
Hmm.
and if he turns into what he was believed to be coming out of high school, and he lives up to the hype that he had coming out of high school, he
Hmm.
very much can be enough of a difference maker to put Alabama firmly in a national championship conversation, come November.
No, I don't think there's any question about it. I think they've got a good shot. And along Radio Row in Tampa, uh, we can certainly look out for uh, Sark, who never met a microphone he didn't like.
Hmm.
Marsh Manning probably will be, ever present. Kirby will hide because he doesn't like it. Not that he's hiding from anybody. Just what I'm saying is he absolutely deplores the sit down and do the. I mean, it's almost like he's a hostage whenever you put him in front of it because he just doesn't like it, which is fine. I mean, there are a lot of coaches that don't like anything like that. So
Yep.
get him.
Yep.
It's not a shot at him. It's a, he's kind of like, you know what, just it's my job. Just leave me alone.
Yeah.
Which is not to say he's. I mean, Kirby's a nice guy. That's not my point. But he's not a media guy.
Yeah. The one other thing that I'm curious in, uh,
Hmm.
because I know Oklahoma, their day is today.
Hmm.
Brent Venables was speaking earlier, and I
Yeah.
I don't know this. I haven't seen it. I'm assuming John Mateer was one of the players that they brought with them to media days, and it has been
My understanding
discussed.
is, yeah, he did.
Yeah, it was discussed in the offseason. Obviously he had that hand injury last year, and
Hmm.
really, his throwing motion was something that was discussed. And
Hmm.
he says that he has gone in and reinvented his throwing motion in the offseason
Hmm.
to partially because of that injury. But I'm curious to see what kind of quarterback. I want to hear him talk about it today because I assume that he's going to be asked. And I'm
Yeah.
very curious going into the season what it's going to look like because for as good as he was, he did have accuracy problems. He was only sitting around, I think, upper 50% towards the end of the year, which
Hmm.
is not good enough if you're going to win at
Yeah.
a very high level. I think that was shown later in that playoff game in that first round.
Mhm.
And so I'm curious to see what his throwing motion looks like and if it improves his accuracy going into the year.
Mhm.
Because if it's able to improve his accuracy and he's able to complete a couple more balls, what he's able to do, what the way he sees the field and what he's able to
Mhm.
do with his legs, if you can add the accuracy aspect into that, it makes him a really, really special football player.
Well, we're going to have a lot of time to talk SEC this week. They're going to go all the way to Thursday, and we'll definitely have some. We'll get some audio clips that we can play and give you a feel for kind of what's going on in Tampa and what people are thinking about and what they're talking about. So, hang with us this week. We're going to be all over the SEC, and we'll get you some quotes and some interviews, and then Matt and I'll do our best to break it down for you. So,
Mm-hmm.
any last words before we get out of here? By the way, uh, I don't know if you noticed it, but there's a team in Boston that's played pretty good baseball over the past couple weeks.
Yeah, it look last year I felt it was I was ecstatic last year when they won 10 in a row going into the
Mhm.
All-Star break.
Right.
Last year when they won 10 in a row going into the All-Star break, they came out of the All-Star break and they did not
Hmm.
look like the same team going into it. This
Right.
year it's carried over. There is a different energy. This is
Hmm.
honestly the most fun I've had watching Red Sox baseball since
Hmm.
probably 2021 in the playoffs. It's it is a joy. It They're now 2 games above 500, something that
Hmm.
felt impossible 3 weeks ago when they lost a series to the Rockies. They were the
Right.
worst team in the American League by record. It wasn't,
Mhm.
there was no debate. It was, what are we going to get for Aroldis Chapman? Will Sonny
Mhm.
Gray waive his no trade clause? Even
Right.
talks about, maybe you see about Wilson Contreras. He had another year of control on him, but it was something that was thought of as a possibility. There were a lot of these guys that you were
Hmm.
looking at as where are they going? Now it's who are you getting, and that's a fun thing because only 2 games over 500. That's not anything all that impressive in terms of a record, but when you look at it, and that's firmly planted you in a wild card spot right now with how
Hmm.
bad the rest of the American League is. It
Right.
makes you realize that hey, like this team, they're starting to be who Craig Breslow believed they would be, and they are that because of the way they're playing baseball, the way that they were really designed, or you
They're
believe that they
built.
were
Yeah,
built
they
to
were
be.
built that way.
And it's something where you go back and you look at what Tampa Bay did early in the season, and I
Hmm.
think there's some similarities. The Red Sox don't have any type of they don't have the same kind of speed in the bottom half of their lineup that Tampa Bay has, but they've started to play their roles better, the same way that Tampa
Mhm.
Bay has, and play the game of baseball differently. They bunt, they play more cohesive, and they've got
Mhm.
really really good pitching. I mean, their pitching has been fantastic,
Mhm.
and the bullpen's been fantastic. It's had the lowest ERA in baseball over this run
Mhm.
of 13 straight games. Um, it's been proved out, but now you have the two hottest teams meeting for a 3-game set in Boston starting tonight with the Orioles, who come in on a 7-game winning streak
Mhm.
against the Red Sox, who are obviously sitting at 13 right now.
Yeah, and I know that Kevin Cash the other day after I think it was Sunday's game uh, said, "Look," he says, "we got a 3-team race." Yeah, he goes, "Boston's played phenomenal baseball." He said, "We had a streak, they had a streak." He goes, "I'm sure that that's going to be a fun." I guess we had 65 games left in the season, and he said, "You know, I didn't expect it to be easy." And he goes, "Nobody expected us to be there." He says, "Nobody expected Boston to be there." But he said, "Here we are." He says, "The Yankees are stuck in the middle, and we'll see." I
Yeah,
did see one last thing, which this was on about the Yankees. Michael Kay on a Yankee broadcast this weekend said that it's possible that um, that Aaron Judge doesn't get back until mid-September.
which is it's a big blow for them because there's
Mhm.
such a different lineup. They
Mhm.
still have the pitching to be
Yeah,
able to sustain throughout it, but when their offense gets bad, it gets really bad
yeah,
because they are reliant. It has to be Ben Rice and it has to be Cody Bellinger because
right,
Jazz Chisholm, he had a very big home run last night. You absolutely cannot take that from him. But
right. Mhm.
the combination of three guys who, when they made the World Series back in 2024, guys that were
Mhm.
hitting the baseball really well for them, and Jazz Chisholm, Anthony Volpe, and Austin Wells, all three of them are not good right now.
No,
Trent Grisham is struggled since his comeback from the IL. He hasn't been bad, but he hasn't been a guy that's hitting 290 for them either.
right.
So their offense is skidding a little bit. And one more thing, just going back to the Red Sox, I was thinking about
Mhm.
it. You know, you don't win that many games without being a little bit lucky. And you go to
Oh, sure.
yesterday's game against Tampa Bay, and the fourth inning, I
Mhm.
was it the fourth or the third? Regardless, they scored 3 runs without registering a hit. Like
Yeah, that
that's
was the
stuff.
third inning.
Yeah, that's stuff. That's stuff that like it only happens to teams when things are going right. And
Right.
right now, for them, things are going right. It's
Mhm.
not going to go right forever. You can't be stupid enough to think that. But when you get it to go right for this long, you've put yourself firmly back in contention. You have to
Yeah,
continue playing.
that's all you
A
can ask.
similar type.
Yeah,
Yeah.
all you can ask for is to be in contention.
Yep.
You know,
Exactly.
and from that point on, you're good. All right, more talk about baseball, and of course, back to the SEC media days tomorrow. Thanks very much for everybody for joining us. We'll see you tomorrow. Hello.